This is the Martinus Cosmology podcast, a podcast dedicated to the thoughts and ideas of the Danish spiritual writer Martinus. My name is Mary McGovern and I'm your host for today. I'm at the Martinus Centre in Klint in Denmark, where I've been attending a conference on sustainability and new models for housing and the organisation of society, partly based on the ideas of Martinus. And my guest today is Karin Jansson from Sweden, who was one of the lecturers at the conference today and is one of the members of our voluntary teaching staff at the centre. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you very much.
So perhaps you could tell us something about what your lecture was about this morning.
Yeah, I was talking about the intelligence of nature and how that can influence us and how we can learn from nature when we are creating new societies and, all the new technology and new solutions we need for all the problems we have on this planet. So, the intelligence of nature is something that Martinus talks about. But it's also that many other people have picked up in different ways, and they have seen that this can actually help them to design new things. So I was showing some different things around the world which are already using these kind of principles.
There are many conflicts in society today, issues like pollution and poverty and waste and all sorts of things. Is it possible to solve them? Where are we going? Where is evolution taking us?
Yeah, of course, it seems like we are at a very difficult point in our evolution today. And if we look around the world, we see all these things, pollution and poverty and climate crisis and wars and so on. I guess many people think that this is not possible to solve. Man is not a perfect being and he cannot do really much about it. But from a Martinus point of view, it looks quite different because he shows us that we are at the very last point, you could say, in our evolution. I mean, it's not the last point because we will develop in eternity, but we are heading towards the real human kingdom, and we have come a long way from being minerals and plants and animals, and it has taken billions of years. But right now we are quite close to something new, and that is what we are seeing on this planet right now, because it causes a lot of conflicts and problems. Before we were very much ruled by our instincts. So, for example, animals, they know what to eat. It's not a problem. They don't have to analyze it to think about the protein content or something like that. They just know what to eat. But today, if you ask people, they have all these ideas about diets. And we are trying to work with our intelligence today. So this is something a little bit new in evolution, if we are looking at evolution from the perspective of billions of years. So we are at a point right now where we have a shift from instinct to intelligence, feelings, and intuition. And that will lead us forward, but it will take about 3,000 years, Martinus says.
And what do you mean by feelings in this context?
That is the ability to feel, to have emotions, and to understand what other people and ourselves also what we are going through.
So kind of empathy and compassion.
Yeah, exactly, compassion. So we have to have many experiences to develop compassion, and we also have to go to school and have many experiences to develop our intelligence. And when they balance, that is the point when we reach intuition, and at that point we can also reach into the vast ocean of cosmic knowledge, because all of these problems you mentioned before, there are actually answers to them. There are solutions. And people today don't think that there are any solutions, but there are. Once we can get into this balance, we will also understand what the solutions are. So this is really an interesting time when lots of the problems are surfacing in a way, but also we will find new solutions on many different levels, technical levels, but we also need solutions about how to socialize and decision making, and there are so many different fields we have to work in.
And my experience is that there's a sense of crisis. They talk about climate crisis and energy crisis. There are, of course, crises in the form of wars and natural catastrophes and so on.
Yeah.
So there is a sense of crisis. And I know people who can hardly sleep at night because they're afraid the earth will burn up or we will destroy the planet. So what does Martinus say about that? I mean, is the earth destroying itself or...
No, I mean, the planet is a living being and it's actually quite good at taking care of itself. So we don't have to worry about that. But humanity is going through a crisis. And that crisis is actually that we don't know how to live. We don't know life itself. And still we are quite... well, a lot of us is still ruled by the self-preservation principle, the principle of self-preservation. So it means that we have this egoistic side of ourselves, where we can be aggressive, we are greedy, we want power, and so on. And this is just part of us, which is still there from the animal kingdom, but it's not good for us because it creates this chaos, of course. But there is also the humane side in us growing, and we have to emphasize that. We have to feed that side inside ourselves, and be more loving, more caring, and so on. And that will actually solve the crisis. So it's not like the world is collapsing totally, but we will go through difficult times. Yes.
And of course, maybe I should put in here that the development of compassion and neighborly love and so on can't be achieved totally in one life. So reincarnation is an important part of this picture, but we've talked about that in previous podcasts, so we won't go into it now. But I just mention it for the sake of completeness because it can sound very utopian because people die as in a state that's not very developed, one could say. I mean, you don't finish your development in one life.
Of course not. So Martinus, he talks about evolution in the same way as natural science does, but he adds it's actually we who go through this evolution. It's we who were plants and animals, and now we are, as he calls us, terrestrial human beings. It's not really that we are human beings, but we are heading towards it. Yeah.
So what's the difference between a terrestrial human being and a real human being?
Well, that is that we still have so much of our egos, of our animal sides active in us, and we will leave that behind and develop a true Christ consciousness, a loving consciousness. And that is the only way we can solve our present problems, because cosmos is itself, it's built up of love. It's love and intelligence in a combination. And if we don't have that balance in ourselves, we can't listen to the universe. But we will be able to do that in the future.
You talked about cycles during your lecture today. What's important about cycles?
Yes, cycles, it's one of the basic principles how life is built. And we can see it almost everywhere. If we look into ourselves, into our cells, we can see the genes, and it's actually a DNA spiral. It's a double helix spiral, so we can see it deep down in ourselves. But if we look up into the sky, we could also see the Milky Way, and that's also built like a spiral cycle. So actually this is sort of a way that life is building itself, is through cycles. But that is also, of course, connected to recycling. And that is a very important thing that we have to learn on this planet. We cannot only produce things and then also produce a lot of waste. And if we look at nature, we can see that there is no waste at all. Everything is reused and reused. what was once leaves or grass, it becomes nutrition to the soil, and we see this cycle. We can see the cycle with water and so on. So everywhere on this planet we have cycles, except for man. We are producing waste. And I think this is a large field where we really have to put our technology and our best scientists into this in the future to see how can we produce things, because we still need things. I don't believe that we should go into a society like we lived in the past. We are not meant to live like on the Stone Age or something like that. So we need good stuff, but we need to produce it in a new way.
You mentioned the concept of permaculture. Could you explain that?
Yeah, permaculture is a movement, especially with young people around this planet. And it started in Australia, where there were some people who wanted to develop methods for creating sustainable society. So permaculture, it actually means permanent agriculture. So it started with agriculture. How can we produce food in a sustainable way? But then they have also broadened the concept. So now it's also about how can we create houses, how can we use energy, how can we build social societies and social groups that work in a good way. So in permaculture, people look at nature and see what principles are working in nature. And we can see, for example, not to produce waste, to use cycles, to have multifunctions, connections, and so on. So we can see many of these basic principles when we look at nature. And then we try to bring that into agriculture, building houses, forming groups, and so on. And I find it this is not a huge movement, but you can find it in all continents on this planet. And many people try to form eco-villages, farms, and so on, built on these principles.
Yeah.
And I guess that this is work on a small scale, but I guess that people work with these principles is very good for the future, because they could also upscale this in the future.
They can make experiments and learn from them and see what works, what doesn't work.
Exactly.
And then you can upscale things.
Yeah. And of course, right now, one of the huge problems here is that people think that we don't have energy.
Yeah.
Well, so there is a lack of energy, or we shouldn't use fossil fuels, that's bad, and so on. And, Martinus actually said himself that using nuclear power is not the right way for humanity.
Yes, I actually met Martinus himself in 78, 79 and 80. On each of those occasions, as far as I remember, he talked about nuclear power, nuclear waste. And he said that this was something we would have to stop, and it was really urgent in a way. And he said that nuclear waste would give the Earth constipation because it couldn't be recycled. The cycle needed to break down nuclear waste was thousands and thousands of years long. So it's a kind of funny term to talk about giving the Earth constipation, but you get the idea of an organism where something is stuck. It's not going further in the system. So it was interesting that he, at gatherings at the end of his life, he talked a lot about that.
Mm-hmm. Because actually also he said that we will come up with a new source of energy, and he didn't explain really how it works or what it will be. But he said that once we are ready for that, once we have the moral standards to cope or to take care of that knowledge, we will get it to the Earth. And so when he is talking about a future society, it's a society where there is energy for everything we need. So right now, in a way, we are very afraid of energy, and especially fossil fuels and gas and coal and all of this. But Martinus, he didn't really warn against this. Of course, it might be that we are affecting the planet a bit, but the planet is actually quite well developed and
it's quite resilient.
And resilient, so it will cope with it. It might have a short term of fever, but I think we will go through this period. And it might create some natural catastrophes as well, or problems. But right now it's sort of teaching people that we have to care for the earth. And I think that's the most important message here to be learned from the climate crisis and so on. We have to be careful. We can't just throw out waste, and as you said, nuclear waste. It's very dangerous.
I was in San Francisco in October, and I looked out over the Pacific, and I thought, well, the next stop is Japan, like the next piece of land. And I said this to someone I was with. Well, he said, well, actually, the next stop is an enormous pool of plastic somewhere out there. There was an enormous gathering of plastic in the middle of the Pacific, which, if you looked at it from space, was like a big island. So, of course, we have to clean up our lives in a way and stop polluting the planet in ways like that.
But I mean, in the future, we will stop producing weapons and using the best brains in the world to produce new dangerous stuff like that. So of course, in the future, it will be possible to come up with solutions, I think.
Yeah, I think if we stop putting so much energy into war and all the machinery needed for war, it would free up a lot of energy to do something positive and creative.
Yeah.
But of course, as long as wars exist, there have to be people who tackle the situation. So.
Of course, there are still people here who need that experience, so we can't just take it away.
No.
Everybody needs their own experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we have to be thankful for what's happening, because it brings people forward. Without that, we wouldn't create new consciousness.
No.
But also we have to understand that in the future there will be no wars, and people will concentrate on building sustainable societies and production units and whatever. That will be the main focus, I think, for people now.
And could you explain what you mean by sustainable? What does sustainability mean today?
Yeah, I think it means that we have to understand the basic principles of life, as we talked about cycles, and Martinus, he mentions, for example, the principle of life units, that everything is built of life and of life within life. Like if we look into our bodies, we can see that we have organs that are alive, we have cells, but we also have molecules and atoms, and we can go further deep down, and it will be life everywhere. And this, of course, it means that we have to have respect. We have to do everything with respect for these different life forms in the future. So that is a concept that we have to bring into sustainability, I think. Understanding life, the principle of life units. So basically what Martinus talks about is the different principles that build up life. And once we take them and merge them with science, we will have something, a totally new kind of science, I guess. A life science, which is really alive.
Yeah.
And we don't know, because, I mean, we are not really connected to all these solutions. As we said before, that is because we don't have that moral standard yet, so it's not given to us. But we can just know that there are solutions out there. I mean, just yesterday I heard a program on the radio where someone talked about a new machine, we could call it, they had to come up with. It was very cheap, and it wasn't big, and it could just take water out of the air. So you could just have it in the desert. You could have it in the desert, and you would just get water. And I mean, so very simple things can solve some of the biggest problems we have, probably.
Yeah.
And it just have to be an impulse to a scientist, and then suddenly we have all of these solutions. I mean, most of us, we don't really know about how a computer is built up, or how these microphones are built up, and so on. Still, we can use them. So they were sort of sent to us from the spiritual side, and scientists here were inspired to build these things, and there will be new inspiration in the future, once we are through with the worst part of the wars and so on.
I think today we see that the young people particularly are crying out for a solution. We see the particularly this, for example, this girl from Sweden, Greta. Greta, I don't know. And we see the whole movement of young people wanting another kind of life.
Yeah.
There's an enormous growth in not only vegetarianism but veganism. There's an outcry about the way we're using our resources and climate change and so on. There is an outcry.
Absolutely.
Which is forcing the grown-ups, so to speak, to be grown up and to look at these things to see what we can do.
But we also need new systems for decision-making, for politics and so on, because that is also something that is happening today, that so many people, they don't care to vote any longer, and they don't believe in democracy as it is built right now. And we need new systems. And at the school where I'm working, we are using a new kind of system for decision making that is called Socio Cracy, and it's a way to make people more responsible, to feel that they have this responsibility, and also make it possible to have an impact on the decisions. So when we use sociocracy, we are divided into different circles. So there is a top circle, and then there are different circles for different groups, different parts of the organization you're working with. And then each of these circles, they have their domain where they can decide, and they can use the money, and they are free to do what they want. So it's really giving responsibility to everybody, but there is also a connection between the lower circles and the higher circles, so you can get your voice heard, also by the board or whatever you're used to having above you, deciding over you. So it's a way of broaden up democracy, and it's not very easy, because it's also demanding. It's very easy to complain about politics. But it takes some effort to be part of the decision-making processes.
Yeah, and to take responsibility. Yeah, it's one thing to have an opinion and say this is all wrong and they're not doing things well enough. But if you take a responsibility for something, it can be quite another matter.
It is. Yeah. But I think we really need new kinds of decision-making forms to make people part of politics in a new way, and part of, whatever organization or whatever they are part of.
Yes, because if you get a situation where 49% of the population votes against something and 51 votes for it, the 51% majority wins. But then you have 49% of the population feeling disgruntled and not listened to. They're not being heard. So that's not a perfect situation, is it?
No. So decision-making is done very differently in sociocracy. So we have proposals, but we talk them through. So everybody in the circle can add, or they can say that I'm not really happy with this. Could we do it a little bit in this way instead? So we amend the proposals all the time until we reach a consent. And of course it takes some time, but it also means that everybody is satisfied and will carry out this decision. Otherwise we will walk from the meeting and half of the group might think, it doesn't matter, I won't do like this.
Okay.
So in this way, you can also implement the decisions very quickly. So I think this is of course, it's not the perfect way, but it's something towards a better way of how groups can work together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also used by companies, organizations, schools, and so throughout the world. And it's possible to read about it on internet and so on.
Okay. You mentioned an article by Martinus where he said something about how the future society would be. I think there were some quotations from a council meeting from 1980.
Yeah.
Could you tell us something about that? How did Martinus envisage a future society?
Yeah, it's really an interesting article. It has been published as an article
in the Danish and Swedish edition of Cosmos.
Yeah, exactly. But it's actually from a council meeting. Well, he talks about many things there, and he says that in the future we won't have any money, for example, and instead people will pay with their work. So everybody will work with something that they are really interested in, and in that way you pay for all the things you need. So, of course, that's something that is also very important when you're talking about future societies, that we need another economic system. Because the system we have today, it's built in a way that you can rob other people for money.
Yeah,
so we
and
can,
legally.
Legally, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we see now that the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer.
Yeah.
And that's also happening in our welfare countries.
Yes, the gulf is widening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, this will go on for a while. And but in the future, we need another kind of system.
Isn't that another example of a kind of constipation in the system?
Yeah.
That the money is being built up in one corner of the society and is not available for the rest of the organism of society, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And if we think of our body, for example, when I eat, the nutrition I get into my body, it's distributed evenly. But I mean, just think that all of it just went to one leg, and that would be oversized, and the other leg would get nothing.
Yeah.
But that is exactly how the world looks today. But we can see that there is a kind of total loving organization in your body. And that is also the kind of organization we need in the future.
Yeah, so the body is almost like the ideal communistic state.
It is.
Although the word communism is not popular, but Martinus uses it in a slightly different way. He talks about cosmic communism.
Yeah. Because communism in the past, it has been a dictatorship.
Yes.
And it has been terrible in many ways.
So how does Martinus define cosmic communism?
Yeah, but that is, of course, what we talked about before. It's a society where you don't have money, where everything is distributed to everybody that needs it. And you pay with your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and in a way, it's the same as democracy, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So, absolute communism and absolute democracy are perhaps the same. Would you? Agree?
Yeah, and they have to merge, you could say. But because communism, the idea there is that it looks at everybody in the society, but democracy more looks at the individual.
Yeah.
And you could say that in the past, in a communist country, you didn't look at the individual. You could not, as an individual, do what you want. But of course, that is also an important part of it. And in the democratic countries, you look at what the individual want to do, but you don't look at what society needs as a whole.
Yeah.
So you need to merge those two concepts. That's how I think of it.
So individual freedom, but with a responsibility to society.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You take your fair share.
Yeah, and no more.
Yeah, and no more.
But you also give your fair share.
Yeah, and you give your fair share. But Martinus says that if we had an even distribution of all the goods that we have on this planet, there would be no shortages. I mean, everything is there that we need. We have abundance on this planet.
Yeah.
But right now we think that there is a lack of everything, and we are fighting about it.
Yeah.
And that, of course, creates so many bad things. So in the future, we will all become vegetarians, And of course that will create less sickness. So not so many people will have to work, for example, in hospitals and so on. And we don't have to work so much. In the future, it might be just for we need to work a couple of hours every week.
Yeah.
And then we will have time for, developing any abilities that we want, to travel, to meet people.
He talked about studying spiritual science, if that's what we're interested in.
Music, art, whatever you're interested in.
Yeah, then we could create an ideal society that's very beautiful. If we have the time and the energy and the resources to create beautiful buildings and beautiful instruments and works of art. And
exactly, and we could all share them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a Steinway piano or like that, it's only for one person maybe, and in the future it could be shared by so many people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to buildings, he actually says that we will live in palaces in the future, and we could think of that as very beautiful houses. Yeah. And it seems like there will be a kind of community houses that many people will live together, and not everybody together like a family. People will probably have their own apartments or rooms and so on, but there will also be facilities that can be used by everybody. Like where you can eat together, or you can have entertainment, or schools maybe, and so on. Yeah,
I think a lot of people today experience that they can't be bothered cooking.
Yeah,
but if they could just go down to a restaurant in some sort of communal arrangement, then they would probably eat more healthily.
Yeah, that would be really nice to be served good, healthy food. And then maybe you help out once a month or something like that. So instead of cooking every day for yourself, you do it maybe once a month, or if you feel like it, if you feel like helping out. And I think this will be so much better way to live, and especially also when people in the future might not stay in marriages as they do today. And today, if you choose not to marry, or you live like a single, then it might be quite boring. Yeah. So that's really nice to have people around you, and you can socialize if you want to, and you can stay on your own place if you want to.
So it might solve some problems with loneliness.
Yeah, exactly. And then he says that around these palaces we will have big parks and forests, and also agriculture. So I guess the food we need, that will be produced very close to us.
You mentioned in the lecture something about forest gardens. Could you tell me what those are?
Yeah, forest garden, that's a part of the permaculture movement, that they try to build up a garden with perennials. That's plants that stay for many years, like fruit trees, nut trees, berries, edible greens, and you try and design a system that can sustain itself, so it needs very little input. So, for example, there are plants that can take nutrition from the soil and give to other plants. There are plants that can protect each other, and so on. So this is really studying nature and trying to copy it, but with edible plants. And then you create a system that can give you the food you need, and you just go out there and harvest it. It's like Eden's garden.
The Garden of Eden.
The Garden of Eden, a little bit. But it's interesting because it produces, as I said, fruit and berries and leafy greens and so on. And that is really the food that Martinus talks about for the future. That's the kind of thing we will eat.
Yes, he talks in The Ideal Food, his little book, The Ideal Food, about that the nuts and fruit and vegetables, root vegetables, greens, that is the future. That
is the future, and so I think the people who are into these kind of gardens, the forest gardens, they are sort of learning for the future, creating things that could be big forests in the future where everybody could just go and pick their food.
In the little book, The Ideal Food, Martinus also predicts that in the future there will be large areas, big fields that will become orchards, where we will cultivate fantastic fruits,
Yeah.
the like of which we haven't seen today.
Yeah, new fruits. And that's also interesting because we can see that now that people are breeding new kinds of fruits and berries and trying different things out, and they are also breeding new varieties that can, for example, be grown in our cold climates and so on.
Yeah.
So I actually see a little bit of this happening, and we can also see that people want to eat this.
Yeah.
And the agriculture we have here in Denmark, for example, with a lot of wheat and pigs and so on, it's not really what people want to eat any longer because they know it's not very healthy for them.
No.
So we need more of fruits and berries and nut trees and so on.
But we do see examples of, for example, in Denmark, they're starting to cultivate quinoa or quinoa, however you choose to pronounce it, and millet and various other things, where Denmark has very much been pig farming and dairy products and meat up to now. But it is changing.
Yeah, it's really changing. So I guess we are really in a starting process now of creating new food to the people.
Yeah.
And that will also create so much better health.
Yeah. And
there is so much money put into health. I guess in Sweden, at least, more than 10% of what you earn is tax to the health facilities and hospitals and so on.
The whole health service.
Yeah, exactly. So 10% of what you earn goes into health.
Okay.
Or hospitals. And
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's really a lot of money, and it's not meant to be like that. Martinus says it's not meant that people should work day and night for taking care of people who actually destroyed their own health.
No, in a way, it's a kind of enslavement.
Yeah, it is.
It is really.
But of course, it's
humane too.
It's humane, and it's the right thing. It has to be done right now. But I mean, when politicians, when they look into the future, they say that the health field it's always growing, and they say that in the future it will take all of the tax money. They don't know how to, and it will actually almost all people will have to work in it as well.
Yeah.
And that's not a solution we can have.
Yeah, I heard in the news last week here in Denmark that in one part of Denmark they lacked over 1,000 nurses. Mm-hmm. They advertised jobs for over 1,000 nurses and couldn't get them.
Yeah.
So the problems are enormous. Healthcare takes enormous resources of technology, medicine, people, buildings. Yeah. The hospitals are becoming like cities in themselves. So, but that will change very much if we take responsibility for our health ourselves and learn from all these researchers who are working on things like vegetarianism, veganism, mental health, how to take care of yourself and not get stressed and so on.
Of course. And it's very interesting, I think, that there are so many scientists now going into plant-based nutrition and they get so many results. And we can see that they can cure many problems that seemed to be incurable before.
The enormous problems like diabetes and heart disease.
Yeah, exactly.
You can reduce them drastically if you change your diet.
Yeah. Yeah, you can actually reverse some of these things. Yeah. So I think we are getting into a new field.
Yes.
But of course, the problem here is that it's not creating. You don't create so much money if you just eat the right diet. So of course, the big companies, they still want medicines and technical instruments and so on.
Yeah.
So it shows us very, very much that we need another kind of economy, because if the economy drives us in the wrong direction, it's not the right kind of economy.
No. So there needs to be a moral standard behind our economy, which doesn't seem to be there at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it will take some time, and it will take some collapses, I guess, until we are ready for that. But it's also like it's showing itself. Well, for example, both in Sweden and Denmark, we have seen now, we have had scandals connected to the different bank systems we have. So, and this is about, what do you call money
laundering.
Money laundering, yeah. So, of course, it shows that banks are very close to being criminals. And I think this has to be shown to people. And it will change the idea we have about banks and about money and rich people and so on. And it's gradually changing. And we need to have other kind of banking systems.
Yeah.
So it might... I mean, for example, with veganism and so on, it has risen so fast, and there might be other things coming very fast as well that we don't foresee now.
Yeah. Yes, and this whole row of scandals, who knows what it can lead to?
Yeah.
Now the banks are spending a lot of money on trying to prevent money laundering and trying to improve their image and recover. From these scandals. Yeah. So I think all organizations are in a way like people. They have two sides to them. They have this more animal side and this humane side. Yeah. There's this famous book called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and in a way, organizations have these two sides, but we have them too. So perhaps our task is to see where we can contribute to society in a positive way.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Use this Dr. Jekyll side, this humane side.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to be aware of this, that there are two parts of us. And there is one part which is activated, especially when we are afraid or we think there is not enough for us, and so on. And that is the animal side. And then we get angry or we complain and we fight and so on. And of course it looks like that is the way we have to react. Yeah. But normally this just gives us more fights, more anger. We get more afraid and we get depressed, actually. And maybe we don't understand that today, that depression and agony, it might come from us using the animal part of ourselves. Yes. And not understanding that we are becoming Christ beings, which sounds very, like something that is not possible maybe, but it's a little tiny seed of Christ consciousness that it's growing within ourselves. And that is what we need to feed. Yeah. So I think all people, and it's actually also proven by science that you get more happy if you help out other people. You get more happy if you give away money and so on. So we need to engage in some kind of projects, and it could be just, it could be talking to your neighbor and inviting them for tea or something. It could be something very simple, but we have to do things for other people. Working with organizations, saving the planet, working for animal rights, or something that you're interested in, something that is wider than just yourself. So, and in this way, we feed our humane side, and the compassion that we have within ourselves can be shown. So we live at a time where we don't show compassion, but we show a lot of our animal side, and it makes us very depressed, I think, to do that. Yeah,
it's almost as if there is a certain level of depression, especially among the young people, like a lot of fear about the future. They see wars, they see thousands and thousands of refugees in tragic situations. They see health crises and so on. Yeah. And they're crying out for a solution. But according to what you're saying and what Martinus has said, that the future is the development of compassion on all levels. Yeah. On all levels of society. And there's enough to start working on. You can show compassion in your daily life, or you can show it as a politician, or you can show it on any level. So, yeah. But
actually, I can just add there that Martinus says that we should follow our conscience.
Yes.
That's when we have a bad conscience, that is actually because we are not following our higher ideals. We are not in our humane part of ourselves. And then we feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And when we have that feeling inside ourselves, we should listen to that. We might be interested in science and so on, just believing in scientific things, and we think that we can sort of suppress what is happening within ourselves. But that is a voice that is talking to us. And when we follow that, we will see in what way we can do something good for this planet or for the environment or, whatever we want to work with. So it is important to find this light within ourselves because it can guide us.
Yes. So it's the light of our conscience, but also to use the talents we have. Like you could have talents to develop compassion and be of help to society in one area and not in another. So, of course, you could be most used to society in the area that you know something about.
Absolutely.
So it must be very individual where you can help and what you can do.
Very individual. It can be at your workplace. I mean, you might be a teacher or a doctor or it could be in a company. Wherever you are, you could always do something to make it better.
Yes.
And I think that will inspire us. That will give us true happiness.
Yes. Well, on that note, perhaps it's time to close this podcast. Thank you very much, Karin Jansson, for joining us. That's all for now.